Alright folks, sorry for the little delay. We had some technical issues, as one does. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Code It Live. My name is Sam Basu. I'm a dev advocate here at Progress Software. And welcome to Code It Live again. We on this channel, we do a bunch of things throughout the week. We do CMSs on Monday and podcasts on Monday. Tuesdays are for Unity. We are building a VR world. Wednesdays are for React and UI. Thursdays, which is today, it's Xamarin. And I just noticed, like in the startup screen, I had my time wrong because I'm going a little later than normal today to get our guest on. And then Fridays is a chat show. So thank you for joining. Come and hang out with us whenever you can. So like I said, I'm Sam, and with me I have the very special James Clancey today. So James, introduce yourself, please.
So hi, I'm James Clancey. I am a program manager, that PM architect, I think is my official title, something weird like that at Microsoft. And I build fun stuff. It's kind of the thing. I specialize in Xamarin. I've been with, joined Xamarin 2011, I think, way back when. So went through the acquisition at Microsoft now.
Yeah. Good for you. And you do build fun stuff. That's why we have you on, and we're excited to have you on here. Just for the record, that's not Maddie Leisure's Kitchen. And if you don't get the joke, you need to go and watch Microsoft Build. There was some fun stuff. I know, you and Swiki were on, and Maddie's Kitchen came up quite a bit.
Oh, yes. Maddie's Kitchen's photo is great. It looks just like one of the stock photos.
Indeed.
You should. She shared it.
Yeah, I saw that.
I can link it to you.
All right, and I actually did not realize this. We started talking last week. I did not realize you're in Anchorage, Alaska, right?
Yeah, I live in Alaska. When I started at Microsoft, I was the only employee up here, but as of this year, there's been 2 new hires in Microsoft in Alaska. So I'm the only one in Anchorage. The other ones are far away. One is a 6-hour drive, and the other one is about a 3-hour drive away. So we haven't met, especially since they've joined during time of COVID and whatnot. So I'm not the only one anymore.
Good. And how are things holding up in Alaska with the pandemic and all?
We're pretty isolated in Alaska, so we've got a lot of benefits to being up here. I mean, our population of our state is only 600,000 people. No, we're up to 700,000 now as the last census. So 700,000 people. Yeah. So, I mean, there's been more than that infected. Our entire population.
In the mainland, you're probably better off in Alaska right now.
We're better off being in a smaller place. And Alaska reacted pretty instant. The moment we were shut down and in isolation before most of the U.S. did. They shut down all non-essential businesses right away. And so masks have been required for a very long time. They were pretty proactive for it. So we actually didn't go back to school after spring break. We started spring break, and then they delayed restarting school before schools even shut down. They're like, oh, well, we need time to prepare. And then it never opened back up after spring break. So it's kind of funny how long we've been in shutdown up here.
Yeah, everything has been shut down. I'm in Northwest Pennsylvania, and things are opening up back up slowly, but everyone's playing it safe. And I hope the audience here, everyone's safe and being productive. All right, so enough chit chat. Let's get you going. Let's talk about the things that I want to have you talk about. I'm going to share start with my screen. Oops, green screen. That's not good. Hang on.
Green screens are great. Everyone loves a green screen.
We know how to fix that. This is our good friend Elgato. Thank you for the follow, by the way. So that's a quick fix.
Yeah, that happens to me once in a while. Is it one of the HD 60Ss or whatever?
I do.
Yeah, it green screens like that on me all the time.
Okay, so let's talk about Comet. Let's talk about excuse me, the MVU pattern. So I'm going to start off here with a couple of things. So I know build happened, and Scott Hunter put out this post about Maui, which is .NET Maui that's coming up, and it's exciting for everybody. And one of the things he mentioned was obviously like we are coming from an MVVM pattern and the experience coming from a C# and XAML background. But this stuff is very exciting, like MVU. I am actually stoked by what this can do, but I will ask you a few hard questions as we go along. So let's start with the MVU pattern, and then we can get to Comet, and you can show us some fun stuff. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, in this post, there was a link to this gentleman, Thomas Ben's post on how does MVU work. And he's gotten a detailed write-up, but I mean, it's a design pattern, and I know this has been like, oh, hey, Taylor Code is rating us with a party of 7. Thank you, chat. Thank you very much. I have a little ta-da for you. This is interesting, and it's open to a little bit of interpretation, right? So, what are your thoughts on like how MVU differs from MVVM?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff, MVU is a term that a lot of that came from like the Elmish side, and it has migrated from Elm and up through like Fabulous and things like that. And you will hear some arguments whether or not what we're doing is MVU or not. There's a model, there's a view, and an update, so in my opinion it is. There's a couple things that are typically done in there. There's one thing that people think, like, there's a couple things that are slightly different in the way that we're doing it in Maui than you will see in some other frameworks, and so we can talk about some of those differences as we get into it. Yeah. But the idea with it is your UI is always just a representation of state. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole concept of an app. That's what it is. Websites, doesn't matter. It's a representation of state.
James, before you go on, why don't we switch to your screen? Because I think I don't have your camera quite exactly right. So why don't we switch to your desktop?
No problem. Yeah.
And then, I mean, you can pull up a browser if you need to.
It's kind of fun.
There you go. I think that's better. So we're looking at your desktop. So feel free to bring up a browser that shows it better.
That's all right. We can just talk for a second on this. So there's a couple things that are interesting about them, because UI is just a representation of state. And a lot of times when you start doing things with like XAML or things like that, you're trying to put everything in there and you're trying to data bind it, and it's just a different paradigm because you're saying, hey, this is everything that could happen. And then you hide things that aren't there, you disable things, but it's just, I mean, it's a lot of work sometimes, especially if you're doing something, even a simple screen that has like a pull to refresh. And at the top, you want to have like there's no items, click here for the error, whatever. That type of thing, if you want that on your screen at some point with XAML, you add it to your screen and you typically disable it. And then you data bind that disabling, so then that element's removed. The frameworks then say, oh, this thing's there. Maybe we shouldn't even put something for UI, should we not? There's a lot of things going on with that, with how those little just simple things work. Or actually, let's run a sample then, since we are talking about some of that. So along those lines, a sample like this gets a little bit complicated in XAML. And once it runs, so I'm going to show this thing called, it's just my audit report, just telling me how well I'm doing with my framework. And so in this screen, there's a button that says, hey, go generate this report. Now this actually happens super fast, but there's a spinner and then it switches. So let's go into that audit report really quick and slow that down, because, and I think, do I have screen real estate to make this bigger?
Window. Yeah, I see you just fine.
No, I meant the simulator, because the
text is pretty small. Yeah.
That's all. I was just going to check my.
It's visible.
Okay. Yeah. So let me put an await in here. Await task.delay. 5 seconds. All right, then we can talk about it as it goes. All right, so now if I go back to that, go to the auto report, click generate report, and I totally broke it. I'm not sure what state I'm in with my. This Comet's currently in an interesting state because I've been working on different parts of it. Oh, sure. Let me restart that. The hot reload should have worked, but it didn't on the auto report.
So while you're doing that, why don't we back up a step, right? And I'm talking about this, like, sorry for the dumb questions here. I'm talking about this from the mindset of somebody who's done like lots of XAML and C#. And we are used to the model view vModel pattern. And I know the MVU thing is catching up a lot of steam with other frameworks as well, like React Native or maybe even a little bit of Flutter. So the core idea is you get rid of the view model and you essentially have the view just do its thing, and then you update the model directly. So it's kind of one-way data binding.
Kind of. So let's look at this screen really quick, and then let's think of I want you to think about how you would design this in XAML, and let's talk about that, and then we'll look at the code to how this thing works. So we start out. This is one screen. I'm not navigating. We have the generate button. We click it. We switch to our little fuchsia spinner, and then after our 5 seconds is up, we now have a list view. So think about how you would compose that in XAML. What would you do?
Well, I mean, you will, you're switching up the view. So, I mean, ideally you would have like a list view, and then on top of it, I would put like a spinner, like a progress indicator of some type. And when I know my async await is done, I'm going to hide that and swap it over with the list view.
Yeah, and this started out even with a button saying to go generate that first.
Yeah.
So you probably would have done something with navigation just because it's too tricky to try and do that in one screen.
Right. Yeah.
So as you mentioned with how Comet, how the MVU stuff works, the MVU has a state. So this is a view. You kind of ditch the view models, you're saying. Your view, you still can have models and things like that, but your view is your view and your view model. So this has some data coming in that says, is it loading? And then are there any reports? Now, the nice thing about this is with every MVU framework, you will see that there is a method that returns the UI for the current state. So what it does, it says, based on this state, return the UI for me. And you'll notice that the first thing it says is, hey, if we're loading, I'm just going to give you an activity indicator. That's what I'm going to give you.
Yeah.
And if that's not true, it's going to fall down to the next state and says, hey, there's no reports. I'm going to give you a button. And then following down, eventually it's like, well, if there are now report things, I'm going to give you a list view. Yeah. And so the actual contents of that view drastically change quickly based on the state.
Sure.
And so you're able to say, in this state, here's my UI. And you can return your own. It makes a nice tool. You can do these little swap out things.
Yeah.
And it makes things, and this is a complicated case. I mean, most of the time you're not drastically changing your UI based on what's going on. A lot of times you're doing something simple like this, where you say, hey, I have a count, and when I click on this button, I'm going to increment it. And it will go through and update the text and things like that. So this is more usual, or more typical code, I should say, that you'd see. Or at least in the simple hello world, you'd see we have text and a button, and when we click on that, it increments.
Yeah. Do you want to pull up the Comet repo on GitHub?
Absolutely.
Just so folks know. And chat room, we are being quiet. Let us know if you have any questions here for James and me. So tell me, where did you or how did you start with this, and when did you start, and where things are today with Comet?
Yeah, so it's crazy seeing that this is about 14 months old now. That sounds about right. So just over a year ago, I was given a challenge by John Montgomery. He was with DevDiv. I don't know if any of you guys know of him or have seen him around, but John Montgomery, he switched over to doing some AI stuff now. But he gave me a challenge to improve the productivity of our developers by tenfold. He said, that's just a generic number. Just go over that. Let's try and improve their productivity by tenfold. So I was looking at all kinds of things on how to do that. I was looking at how to do like some of the hot reload, and there's some interesting tooling that's come from some of that type of stuff. And this is one of them. I started playing around. I've looked at Flutter. I've looked at how they were doing things. Hold on one second. I don't know why the kids decided to come play in my office right now.
It's the reality.
Let me kick them out.
Yeah, just this morning I was having a conversation with a couple of folks. Dan Siegel, who's a Xamarin dev like us, And then we were talking about, like, do you still have a printer at home? And I'm like, yes, I do, because guess what? I have to print out coloring pages. So
Yeah,
kiddos aren't
printers
bored.
used for the kids a lot. I don't know why they. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard for everyone. 'Cause, like,
Normally, there's a couch right behind me, behind my green screen. They were just like playing on the couch, and I'm like, "Go eat breakfast." All right, so there's all these other frameworks that have been coming out. I had looked at Fabulous, and we were shown that I was in a meeting, and Fabulous was shown off, and we're told this type of thing can only work in F#. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure we got to be able to do something in C#. And so because of that, I was told it wasn't possible, and I'd never be able to get anything close to that in C# without language changes, without runtime changes. I'm like, And so it kind of got me going, and I started playing with it, and then Swift UI was announced about a couple weeks later, and I really liked a lot of the things from Swift UI. And so I tried to merge and kind of like, from all the good things that have just been coming out and all these fun things, I tried to simplify it down to the best of my ability and come up with something different. So that's kind of where Comet came from.
Yeah, and this is pretty awesome, by the way, folks. I mean, you see the repo out there. This is all open source. I talk about it. I show it off whenever I can. I enjoy this. And I mean, before you even get to the MVU design pattern and how you do things in Comet, like in Xamarin.Forms over the years, like we have been able to declare the visual tree in C#. It's just like not a lot of people do that. But like if you really want the best IntelliSense, like C# is here, and you can do all of that visual tree rendering for you, but it's just a little verbose, while this is much more concise.
So it's funny because back in the day, I was on the original Xamarin Forums team. I actually helped do the initial prototype with it, and it was all pure code, no XAML.
Interesting.
And over the years, the XAML has taken, that's what most people have been drawn to.
Yeah.
And so the C# syntax has actually suffered greatly because of that.
Interesting.
So it's kind of funny seeing us go for full circle like this.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of C# code. I always write C# code to do my UI. I have since like 2008, something like that. Once I realized I could always do UI that way, that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
And I've never gone back. I do XAML once in a while because some things are just easier in XAML due to the frameworks being designed for that. Like I said, the C# side has suffered, but luckily there's the C# for markup pull request that just came in to really help bring back some of the C# goodness, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, so like one more kind of difficult question when it comes to MVU and your implementation of it. So I know there have been some discussions, like the purists will say, and again, I think this is open to like interpretation and how we do things in a framework, like should you have to have an update method? Should you have messages that carry things back and forth between the model and what's being updated?
Great question. So a lot of what I mentioned, I did mention that I like to try and simplify things. Yeah. One thing that I always do is whenever I'm doing something, I like to try and look and ask the question why we're doing things. What benefit does that bring, and should I continue doing that? So let me bring up Fabulous. So Fabulous, which is awesome. Fabulous, I mean, this never would have came about if Fabulous didn't exist. So I love Fabulous. Fabulous is awesome. I don't know which one of these pages will be better to show this, but we can look at some of the Fabulous code and see what their little sample looks like. All right. So this is Fabulous. And am I zoomed in? Is my text big enough on this?
Yeah, I mean, we can go like one up, but it's all right.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah,
my hotkeys weren't
much
working.
better.
Now they are. All right. So here's some Fabulous code. You'll see that it starts out by saying there's a model, and it has text and a string, and then it has a message called button click.
Yep.
And then they initialize the model to give it that text. Now there's this update model. So whenever this code does is it basically does a switch based on this message type. Now, this message type is all done based off discriminated unions and things like that, and we don't have those in C#. So until we have those, this syntax is actually not going to be very pretty in C#. What we would have to do is for this message, we'd probably come up with an enum, or we'd use like a tuple that has like a string and we're doing string comparing, or it's just not going to be very pretty until we have this feature in C#. Because they can just say append in as many of these different things as they want, and then they can switch off the model or off that message and do very different things. So now what they do is they take the old model, and this is like the C# records. So records are coming in C# 9. What it does is it makes a copy of the old model and changes that text property to be thanks for using Fabulous. So that's what this update model does, does. It takes that message and just changes the model based on what came in here. And you can pass in anything you want, all the different message types, and you just do the switch statement changing things around. And now it's going to dispatch and create this view again based on that model. Now in here, you can do that same switch stuff I was doing inside of that audit report where I say, hey, if the model has this, then do this, else do this, and you can totally change this thing out. Now, instead of just changing things directly, they now say, hey, go dispatch and create a new, or run that update method. So button click, go run that, and now it's just saying send this message, button clicked. And so now it's going to run through this again. All right. Now, this is awesome. And like I said, there's a lot of the inspiration of Comet came from things like this, but I'm like, this is a lot of code.
Yeah.
I'm writing a lot of boilerplate to do this. And I'm like, well, what's the benefit of doing this? One of the big benefits is every time they do this, they're creating a new model. And so that model, there's not very many instances of this, and I think you can do it inside of Fabulous, but there's the concept of debugging through time.
Yeah.
Every time something changed, they have that model. So they can keep that history of those models and know what changed to create that UI. And so you can actually step through time and see what caused that. Really, really cool.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's one benefit of it.
And that this is one thing that, again, the purists will say, like, always create a copy of your model. But, I mean, this may introduce some, like, issues with debugging, and you have to be really careful, like, how you do things, maybe.
Well, the bigger issue really comes down to these models are very small, but in most apps, most people spend around 30 seconds in an app. Games, they spend a little bit longer. They can spend up to 5 minutes, but most apps that people use, 30 seconds is it. So most app developers actually don't know how to profile their apps. They don't care because memory pressure is never a thing. There are plenty of people who are doing kiosks. Or there's people who are doing things for the medical industry, or there's all these different industries where they're doing apps that have to run and not close for extended period of time. The moment you start doing that and you're keeping things in memory indefinitely, you're going to crash eventually.
Yeah.
You just will. I mean, the whole Boeing thing they ran over was because of that. If their plane stayed running for more than 24 hours, they had a memory leak. And it crashed. It was causing planes to crash.
Like literally.
It's kind of funny. Memory leaks are a problem when you have something that runs for extended period of time. Most app developers don't think about that. So you do run into issues with that. Now, the thing is, if we go back over and we look at the same exact sample in Comet, you will see this is that same exact sample. We are doing the same exact thing. I just removed a lot of the boilerplate. So you're specifying that this is a state. Basically, this is something, and to be honest, the through time debugging, we can do that in debug builds. We can do that. I'm getting that same, whenever you change something that you mark as a state, I pay attention to what changed. I have to. That's how I update the UI. So what happens here is there's some optimizations over pure MVU. So if we go back to, sorry, I keep bouncing back and forth. If we go back to this, every time you call this dispatch button clicked, it's going to run this function, it's going to change this model, then it's going to run this build method again, which is going to create a content page, stack layout, its children, this image, label, button, and then it's going to run a diff. And it's going to diff this tree with the current tree. Very similar to how like HTML stuff works, or if you're doing stuff with like where it diffs the DOM, or you're doing things with Blazor, it works the same way. What it does is every single time it's going to create that entire UI, diff it, and then update based off what changed. All right. Now Comet does that as well. Comet will, when it needs to, rebuild this UI. I mean, you saw that working with the audit report. We saw when isLoading changed, the activity indicator popped up, and then the reports. It will run this body, and if we put a breakpoint in here, we will see it as long as I didn't hot reload. Hot reloading instantly breaks that right now. Oh, nope, it's going. So we're seeing our body was hit, right? I click generate, body was hit again. 5 seconds later, it's going to get hit again, and we can just step through and you see that body getting hit. So that same exact thing's happening. The difference is, all I'm doing is editing the state. And like I said, we do have a history of what changed. We can. I mean, I know what changes, and we can just save that off into memory just like they are. And so what I've done is I've removed a lot of the boilerplate, and I've just said, okay, you're going to mark the state, and instead of having to come up with these messages and saying it's this type of message, do this, you can just manipulate the state. And you can always make a copy if you want. If you want to use C# records, you can do record and then do with. We don't have that until C# 9, so we don't have that now like F# did. But we'll be able to do that and just say, hey, here is the state. Use this model instead, and pass that in with the record. That's a record, and do a copy of it and pass that in, and you'll have that same exact benefit. The difference is, if you want just one model like that, you can just do one here and just do like read only state, and notice the state is read only, and this is like my data object. And guess what? Every time you change that, it's doing the exact same thing. It's going to pass that object in. Every time this object changes, it's going to trigger this body to change. And off it goes. Now, if I go back to that same this button sample, let's run this. And if we look at what this does, if we put a breakpoint in here, we will get this breakpoint. This breakpoint will fire the first time. And this one is button sample 1. So if I can find a button sample 1. All right, so if I click on this, you'll notice that VStack fires and we create this UI. Now this next time I click on this, since we have a breakpoint here, we're seeing the count increase, but it did not rebuild the UI. Oh, is our audio out of sync? I'm sorry, Aaron. It happens sometimes. It's hard sometimes with Skype to keep things in sync because you're seeing video and yeah.
You're coming in. So in our ears, we are instantaneous, but it takes like a second, and then it should be in sync. Like when the video goes up, the audio goes up with it. So yeah, sorry about that, Arian. Hopefully, it could be also network blip on our side, your side. So yeah, give it a bit. Yeah,
we're streaming from all around the world right now.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
I'm in Pennsylvania. He's in Alaska. Yeah.
So
fun stuff like technology
wherever
enables
you
us
guys
to do.
are at.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a super basic question, and this may be again very dumb, but the first thing a lot of people looked at this and said, "Oh, we have never been able to do VS Code with Xamarin because we do VS Mac or Visual Studio on Windows." So when you render things for mobile on iOS or Android, I mean, this is all native. You're running on top of Xamarin.Forms. You're essentially rendering the Xamarin.Forms UI.
This is not running on top of Xamarin.Forms.
No. Okay.
But it's a similar concept. It's still native.
Okay. So you're rebuilding the bridges that Xamarin.Forms has. Like for each of this UI, you're rebuilding all of the native UI bridges. The renderers, so to speak.
That's exactly what I did with Comet, just because I wanted to start over and have a fresh start. And there's a lot of baggage that comes with Xamarin.Forms. And so when we start talking about Maui and what's to come, it's a good thing I did that. So
yeah, because like one of the first questions I heard somebody say was like, how can you use .NET Build when you have to use like MS Build for capturing all of that stuff that Xamarin.Forms does? But this is like a clean slate.
Yes, it's total clean slate, and it's funny you mentioned VS Code because, of course, you can do things in VS Code. Actually, if you do the getting started on Comet, the getting started instructions will tell you to use VS Code.
Yes, saw that.
So there is, oops, let me find the right window. Come on, why are you popping away? There we go. All right, so if we go to the Comet and the getting started, now that I've zoomed it out, it's a lot to scroll to, but if you go to the wiki and you do like the getting started, And this demo, oh no, that demo is VS for Mac, not VS Code. But the getting started, it'll tell you how to do it with like .NET New. You can install the target, you can do .NET New, and then you can actually launch it in code.
Yeah,
which is
that's
awesome.
pretty sweet.
So,
yeah, because like Xamarin.Forms, like we have never been able to do that. We always have to have full VS. And there was one other thing I saw, which I don't know if it was new or you always had it. Like you had, like if you go one page back, like you had Blazor support now. Is that new or you had it?
No, Blazor support's still there. It has been not been something that's been touched and worked on for a little bit. So a lot of the things with Maui, .NET Maui coming out has derailed me a bit from Comet. You'll notice that Comet is not as active as it once was. It's not abandoned. It's still my playground. It's still where I'm trying new things out. But I think it's been a couple months since I've committed. Yeah, about 2 months on some of the stuff. And actually, I have some other branches that are newer that I was working on. But like this one, still around 2 months. So it's been a couple months since I've been working on it, because I've been working on other things just in preparation and things like that. But it's with the rewrite and starting from scratch, there's a lot of benefits that have come from it. Actually, I wanted to finish talking about one last thing on this.
Sure.
With my improvements and some of the things where I've done that are slightly different than traditional MVU, you'll notice the last time we always build and diff the tree. In this instance, it is smart enough to know what was used where, and it knows that this count.value is only used for text, so it actually only refreshes text. So text rebuilds itself, but not the entire UI tree. Right. And so I'm able to do incremental updates and smaller diffs just because of the performance benefit. Because obviously. It doesn't have to. Yeah, it's a huge performance gain, especially when you start seeing how. I mean, this is a simple thing screen. These screens start to get pretty big.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the credit card view. When you start diffing this thing every single time, you're talking performance hits.
Yep. Yeah.
You just are. And so we don't rediff this thing every time. We don't have to, because we can do those little. We can just update the text because we know how things were used. And so there's a lot of benefits to this newer style.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take a second to answer something that that Aryan was asking. So this is the thing about like Xamarin, who is it for, and what should we look forward to? Here's my 2 cents. Like if you do any type of .NET, if you have done any type of XAML or C#, maybe not even XAML, like Xamarin is a very, very easy boat to get on to get your .NET apps to iOS or Android, and that's traditionally been the case. In future, I think what we are doing is, thank you for the follows, by the way. We are just opening up, I think, the funnel. So traditionally, we have kind of maybe gotten ourselves into a walled garden. Now we are welcoming web devs and people who do other design patterns into the fold. So this should not, Xamarin going forward, like .NET MAUI, should not just be for .NET developers. It should be welcoming to web folks and other folks as well. And the tooling it's right there, however you want to use it. So James, do you have any thoughts?
No, yeah, I agree. If you like C# and even people who we're trying to make .NET more appealing to even the newer generation of developers. .NET does have some stigma every once in a while of being this older technology, and I'm being tapped again. Kids are wrecking.
No worries. Yeah, and Aryan, you're right. I mean, it's just not about the red flags. It's whatever project, whatever app you're building. Like, pick the right framework, pick the right tools that let you be productive, and also like code sharing is important, because ideally or realistically, you're not just building one thing. You likely have web apps and mobile apps or desktop apps, and you want to code share if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. Pick the right tool for the right time, and also based on the team. It's not even the right tool for the right project. It's based on the right team. If you have a team of nothing but Swift developers, and you're telling them, all right, we're starting over, you're doing this all in C# Xamarin, that's not going to be a successful project. It's just not. So you got to pick the right thing for the right project, and also the right, I mean, MVU is new, it's hot, people like it, but it's not for everybody. Some people are going to be so much more productive in their XAML, and there's no benefit for them switching over to this. The idea is we want to give you options and let you choose and build the apps the way you want to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had some like XAML purists look at this and like, I don't know, and maybe it's just not for you. It's just like for somebody else. who comes from a background where MVU is more of a natural pattern. And Aryan, to answer your question, like C# is for a lot of different things. It's not just for mobile. It lets you just target just about any platform, any device that you can think of. And so does JavaScript. So suit yourself, no matter what language you pick. Thankfully, we are in a mode where the frameworks and the platforms sort of start getting out of your way and just let you build, which is good. Now, I do want to ask you one question. Like, and I see you have the UI up where you're building like a complex visual tree, and I see things like VStack and HStack. What else is there in terms of what's built in terms of the bridges, the rendering?
Yeah, so we started, like I said, I started over and I wanted to do things very differently. And so if you've been keeping up with how Maui, any of the stuff with the .NET Maui, a lot of the features that have been talked about are like the property mappers. A lot of those things 100% came from Comet.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just that whole pattern of how these work, a lot of this is, yeah, like I said, 100% from Comet. So if we go into these, one of these, you'll see on one of these, I call them handlers because I didn't want people being confused when they're switching. But yeah, looking at a button handler, check this out. These mappers 100% came from here. Now, these are slightly different. I do things based off an environment, but the concept is the same. So a lot of these things, and if you haven't seen some of the stuff on why these are really powerful, this allows you to, if you've been doing anything with Xamarin Forms and you want to change one thing or even add your own, hey, call this for me, please, when the renderer is instantiated, or whenever I change this property, just let me know. That is a pain. You have to subclass, you have to register. With the new stuff, you can just inject into the property mapper and at any point completely 100% change the way your app works, behaves, and without doing a custom renderer. Yeah. It's really, really nice to be able to just drop in and say button renderer. And whoa, my hotkeys. I had my keyboard was hooked up to the wrong computer. That's why my hotkeys weren't working. I just pressed the switch button.
The things.
Oh no, button renderer. Why am I just told you I did them as handlers.
I also have like two keyboards sitting in front, and sometimes I get confused which one's what.
I use a physical switch to switch between my keyboard and mouse between the two machines, and then I use software to also do it. Yeah. And so the hotkeys may or may not work based on what I want, but I can just do like really cool stuff and say foo. Foo does not exist. Of course it doesn't. And now whenever it's going to give me the view renderer, whenever foo is called, or whenever a button is created, it's going to call foo for me. And it's going to try and hot reload all that for me. It can't hot reload that part. It doesn't know how to. But on this part, whenever the button is instantiated, or if I do say, I can tell it that foo changed, and then I get a notification. And I have, at this point, full access to the renderer and everything about it. And it's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
There's some new stuff that we also did that were very different. If you haven't looked at the clip shape stuff.
No, I have not.
The clip shape stuff is really, really, really fun. All right, guys. Why are you playing in my office right now? I'm in a meeting. They ignore me all day long until they hear me talking. And then...
What do you mean you're in a meeting?
I know. So clip shape, I have been messing with that, and that's really bad. Let's hope hot reload is in a good state. Like I said, Comet is in a transient state right now. I've been rewriting stuff. I've been toying with things. It's going to be rewritten to use all the new Maui stuff as well as I prototype. But that line width is off. And so is that. The hot reloads. I thought I fixed that. I might have fixed that on a branch. Okay, well, normally it doesn't leave the page and go back. You stay on the page you were on. But you'll see that I updated that and it doesn't look so funny now. So what I've done is there's an image here and the clip shape is removed from it. If we look at what it looks like without, it's just a square image, right? And then what we've done is we've said, hey, let's add a clip shape of a circle to it. And then let's add an overlay of a circle with a stroke of that white. And you saw me change that line width when it was like, we can change it to fuchsia, my favorite debug color. And I'm going to have to go back into that. And now it's pink. And so we can quickly change these things and see how they are. And we can clip any view. Now, this is something that luckily has also made it into Maui. I don't know if it's been shown much, but the idea of being able to automatically encapsulate things.
Now you're talking about like juicy details that we do not know.
So this is making it into Maui as well.
Nice.
The code's actually already in there. So it's really cool to be able to say, hey, let's overlay this thing. And whether or not that's been exposed to forms yet, I don't know, but that has been is in the new layer. So actually, if you want, we can talk about the new layer and kind of how some of that stuff works or what's going on with that.
Yeah, let's go.
So right now, you'll notice that Comet followed the same exact architecture as Forms. There is a Comet layer, and then there's a platform layer. And this platform layer, if you look, has a reference to Comet. Well, as you've mentioned, I've restarted rewriting that bridge. I've rewritten from scratch how we interact with the native platform. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot of work. There's a reason Comet's not done yet, because it's a lot of work. And I spend more time actually writing those handlers or renderers than I would actually working on the framework itself. That's the bulk of the work. Doing the layout engine again. You have to do a cross-platform layout engine. So what we're doing with .NET MAUI is we're taking the Forms renderers and we're rewriting them to match this pattern. So they're going to have a property mapper, and they're going to work very differently. It makes it to where everything has these static methods, which has one little job. And we're adding interfaces. We're doing composable interfaces to where we'll have like a text, we'll have clickable, we'll have all these other things to where these things, what makes a label, an I label is going to be composed of a bunch of sub interfaces, and then these handlers are just going to deal with those interfaces. And then be like, I can apply the text, I can do this. And so that layer is going to be the root layer. So even with Xamarin Forms right now you reference Xamarin Forms, right? And then on iOS, there's the forms.iOS, there's forms.android that comes in, and that brings the renderers in.
Yep.
We're inversing that. So there's a new cross-platform layer that just has interfaces and renderers. That's it. And the layout engine. That is the root.
Yeah.
It knows nothing about data binding. It knows nothing about MVU. It knows nothing about MVvm. There's no bindable properties. There's none of that stuff. And if you look at the renderers right now, they're filled with that in Forms. So the idea is they're just going to be passing in this interface. Right now it's just a button. Now in my code it shows a button, but that'll be an I button. And then from there, it's going to know how to map the font, map the color, and that is going to be cross-platform. And sorry, not exactly cross-platform. There's going to be one per platform there. But that is going to be a shared layer. So now Comet is going to use those renderers. Well, Maui.mvu. Maui.mvvm, Xamarin Forms current, is going to use those renderers. Now, as you mentioned earlier, I do have Blazor backend. I have a Blazor backend for it. The beautiful thing about doing this is my Blazor backend is not usable by Forms. Now that the backends is the lowest common layer, if I bring over my Blazor backend from Comet into this new Maui.core, Forms is going to get Blazor for free.
Whoa. Okay, there's a lot going on in what you just said.
There's a lot going on with what I just said.
There's a lot. Okay, so let's back up. So when you just like looking at your Blazor backend, like it is rendering just Blazor components and just HTML, right? So when you say bring it over to Xamarin, like are you talking about like a native mobile app, or are you talking about?
No. I'm saying putting it on the web. So
okay,
we already have like the Blazor bindings.
PWA type stuff.
No, well, not even necessarily PWA. You have your Xamarin Forms app. You want to run it all. You want to deploy it as a website.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You can just take your Xamarin. So the idea would be if you write an app in Maui, You'd be Maui, and then you could just tell it where to target. I
Oh,
want to
that would
run
be
this on
sweet.
iOS. I want to run this on whatever those backends are. You can just run it on any of those. That's the common layer, right? Whether you wrote it in Maui MVU, Maui Mvvm, it doesn't matter. You have these different platforms, just like you have now Xamarin Forms platforms. Right now, you have a project head for each of those. You have to,
Yes. Yeah.
because that is the way the dependencies work, right?
Yeah.
Well, now that we're inversing those dependencies, you'll be able to write a Maui app and then say, hey, run it on this platform, run it on Blazor. So now it's just going to be a website. Why not?
That is pretty sweet. Because like right now, in fact, it was funny. Like Silverlight is actually coming. Like end of life support is like middle of next year, I think, like or August of next year. And we were talking about this. Like Maui still has like 2 months. Maui would be like 2 months away when Silverlight officially ends. But that doesn't mean like it dies. But right now, the only way you can have XAML back on the web is so Uno platform does WASM,
amazing.
yeah, WASM renderers for that'll take Xamarin Forms UI and render it on the web. But you are saying we can just like do it natively in Maui because you're inversing like how you do this. Okay, all right.
So let me switch over to my Maui code. This has been shown. This code's not public yet. This has been some of this has been brought into the official Maui repo. This was the playground we used when we were prototyping that stuff out. So, and if I I don't know if I'm on the
Rainbows,
right
folks, you're seeing it here.
So some of this was showed off during build a little bit, but it hasn't been released yet. So Xamarin Forms now in this one depends on Maui core.
Mm-hmm.
So this thing's a little bit of a mess here. Now inside of here, this has nothing else. It just has the core stuff in it. So these renderers are broken up into like buttons, checkboxes. These are the different renderers. And this is using the new stuff that's going to happen for .NET 6 with the new multi-targeting stuff, to where these are all going to compile, and it's going to compile a DLL for iOS, one for Mac, one for standard, one for Win32, and notice that this has that new mapper stuff in here. And on each platforms, it's implemented. Well, there's a couple cool things about this. This makes it to where if you look at our new sample, yes, in our demo, we had iOS, Android, but there's zero code in this thing. All it does is set this thing up. Inside of the My App, I can right here, inside of my code, access what I need to. As long as we did that right, I should be able to do, I don't know, I have not loaded this code in a while, so I don't know what state we're in. But notice I have access to the renderers right here. This is inside my shared project because the renderers are the root now.
I see.
So that changes everything. So I can jump into here and say button mapper, and I can do the same thing I did before where I said foo, or I can override and say, hey, I want to set the title, the text myself. I just do name of ibutton.text. And now render view, I think that's the pattern it does. Now I can even now say if it's right now it's on the not.NET standard one, but I can switch to iOS and I'll get iOS IntelliSense.
Nice.
Now I can just say r dot native view as UI button, UIKit UI button. And right here in my shared layer, I have access to the native components because we've inversed that dependency. And so anything that you're supporting, any of the targets that you add to your sample, you will then have the option to switch between them, and your IntelliSense will then switch based on which target you're targeting, and you're just going to have all this type of stuff, and I can do whatever I want and set the text myself. I can now do equals, no, it's dot set title on iOS, isn't it? Oh no, that's the V. I want to do B. I'm using the wrong one.
Yeah.
V dot set title or set text. I think it's set text. And now I can even format that code and say, you know what? Let's grab that V dot text plus hey. So now every one of my buttons is going to have hey written on the end. Because why not? Who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah.
But you have access to inject into these things and do these in the inverse.
Yeah.
And so because of that, though, when I change this renderer, I'm changing it for MVU, Mvvm, whatever pattern comes next. If in 3 years there's a new pattern, we're just like, you know what? We're just doing models and views. Who knows, right? We're cutting out the update, or we're who knows what's going to come next. Anything can now use these renderers directly and only deal with what they care about. They don't have to build the entire thing. I mean, if I was doing Comet and not had to rebuild the renderers, it would have been done and shipped a long time ago. But renderers, it's a lot of work. That's most of what the Forums teams works on anymore, is fixing renderers, working on renderers. And so if we have those to where we fix a bug in one and it fixes them everywhere, or we add in a pure Skia-based rendering, guess what? You get that in Forums, you get that in Comet, you get that in whatever comes next, which is really, really exciting to be able to just jump in and change these things around.
Yeah. No, that is exciting. And trust me, like we know, like I work with Progress Software, and I am mostly with the Telerik side of the family, and we do have Telerik UI for Xamarin, and it's a mixed bag. So most of them are native controls, and then we have some custom renderers, we have some pure Skia ones, and almost all of the time the engineering team spends is in those renderers and making sure it's like pixel perfect. So yes, this would be nice. And this kind of brings me to a few follow-up questions, which I'm not sure if you are willing to answer right now. So moving forward in Maui, like we have the concept of a single project where everything lives. Where are all of these renders? I mean, are you just going to like the builds are going to be smart to know which one to use based on which platform you're targeting?
Absolutely. So you'll notice IntelliSense changed based off that. If we go into this project, right now, this one's the iOS one. This one is the Android. These are all partial classes. And so our build system does this for you now. I mean, most people have heard of the bait and switch stuff, or if you haven't. But if I go into this, you'll notice as I switch between these, all of that IntelliSense changes. iOS only gets brought into the iOS. You'll notice I don't have that option there because it knows .iOS is only for iOS. .Mac is only on Mac. And so those things are, if I go into here and I switch to iOS, since I'm on iOS, if I do go to declaration, it's going to take me to the iOS file, right? Oh no, sorry, it should have been smart enough to do that. Why did it not do that? Let me switch again. Which one am I on? I'm on not standard. I'm on Android. Granted, like I said, this is early prototyping.
Yeah, hotbits.
This is, Okay, it did. Nope, it's still jumping me down to the... I don't know why IntelliSense isn't being smart. It should have brought me to the Android one, because that's what's actually compiled in. Or maybe I'm not doing the right one. Oh, no, there is nothing. I'm in a bad example. I'm in a very bad example. Let me switch out a button. It was doing exactly what it should have. I think label will be accurate. The problem is I've gone through and I've started changing some of those to where you'll notice the button, like we were on the button, I've changed it to where it doesn't need those individual ones. It's doing it all in shared. I've added extension methods to the native views. So on each platform, the set text, if I was to go to that one is going to be Android. So the renderers are even becoming more identical. It's like, oh, I can set the color, and I just add extensions. And so now that set color extensions on all the platforms. So that's, it was doing exactly what it should have done. All right. So now if I go to the label renderer, I'm in that standard. If I switch to iOS and I right click on this, not all of these have been updated to that, but you'll look, hey, I'm inside of iOS now. And if I did that again, it knows the context you're in. And so it'll do the same type of thing for you guys. Now, Matt, you mentioned you guys have a bunch of these controls. If you guys wanted to bring those to Comet, we would have had to do on a little wrapper. But now with the new Maui stuff, if you write them to the new renderer layer, it'll work for MVU, Comet, whatever framework comes next. So the next time Microsoft's like, hey, we've got something new, you guys are going to be like, oh, crap, now I have to support more platforms. You're just going to... It just works because having this new common layer that can be used by everybody, it's kind of future-proofing us.
Yeah, like so for us, I mean, it's obviously a wait and watch game at this point. Well, we do have like on a completely different note, like Blazor has bindings for mobile. I mean, they're coming to this from a completely different angle, and maybe it's experimental, maybe it'll go away, and it sounds like this would let you bring in or target Blazor anyways. But I mean, we have some experimental bits, and yeah, like I said, some of the native stuff we will have to kind of bring the renderers over. But going forward, it'll be a easier game.
So the nice thing about this is we do have this mapper concept. You don't have to use that. We do encourage you to eventually map or convert to this, because then at least anything you want people to be able to adjust, because now they can quickly tweak your renderers without subclassing. Yeah. That's huge. So yeah. We do recommend you guys do that, but you don't have to. What if all you'd really need to do, when we brought over raw Xamarin.Forms renderers, and each renderer took us like 10 seconds to bring over, because all we did was add the interface. There's a new interface, and it's just changing a couple things around, and it'll work. You won't get all the benefits if you do that. You just won't, because yeah, the mapper things are really, really powerful. Yeah. So and the mapper things, you can even use those mappers. If you ported your stuff to the mappers, you can still use that on Xamarin.Forms. There's no reason you can't. So it's not like it's a one-way street and only one thing. So there's some things that you can do to where you can use it on both, which is kind of nice. So you can, I mean, right now, due to maintenance, our plan is to use those renderers, the same renderers for iOS and for Xamarin.Forms and Maui, with some if-defs in there to change things around. So yeah. We're planning on trying to do something like that for ourselves going forward. But the nice thing is, once you switch to Maui, we shouldn't be asking you to switch to something else, because it just works. And it really doesn't take you long to get it ported over. Doing the mappers will take more time, because now you're separating. The nice thing is, though, if you look at a Xamarin.Forms renderer, all you're doing is you have that on property change, that switch statement, right? That says, hey, if it's this property, run this method. If it's this property, run this method. That's all our mappers are, just in a cleaner fashion. So you don't have to call all those properties on initialize or on element changed and then run them again on the property changed. You just set it in the mapper, and then we'll call every property on the mapper when it's set up, and then we'll take care of it again on those property changes for you. So it's just a way for you to tell us what everything is, and then we take care of it from there.
Cool. Very cool. So fun times coming up. I can't wait for Maui and everything else to come to age. So I have a couple of questions for you. If you go back to just the plain Comet rendering, like the click counter that you had, mm-hmm. If I were to look at like a really big enterprise code base, which brings in like MVvm frameworks, and you have testability of every component, you have things nicely separated out with like commands, and you have things between the view models and navigation, everything is handled. What's your stance on like testability with the MVU pattern?
Great question. Guess what? I have UI tests.
Okay.
I have to.
Yes.
The nice thing is these views, you can create those views and run those in a test. So what I've done is I have a handler. I have a test handler that makes it to where I can test everything, and I can make sure things change. So I have this generic view handler. This is the handler for everything inside of my test thing. Everything will just use this handler. What it does is it lets me keep track of what happened, because that's all you care about, right? You care about when on this one. So let me find one that's rebuilding. Maybe one of these binding tests will be more accurate for what you do. So right here, my magic binding test. I make sure that when I create a new page, I give it I'm returning a body, and I'm doing this inline. You can, like I was showing on this view test, use the view. I have my own state page thing. You can bring this in. You can reference your own sample project and just use those views. So you can instantiate one of those views. I assign it a view handler, my generic view handler, so my testing one, and we can make that automatic, so we'll just do that for you in test mode. And now on here, I edited my text field, and then I assert that those values changed. I'm just doing it right against that exact view. There's no point in mocking everything out. There's no point in doing things. I can just go into here and make sure those values changed. I can access that view handler, and my generic view handler has properties on there to where I can ask it what changed, and you'll see me doing that in here. So right here I do this, and then I go and I ask the view handler what changed. Maybe I don't on that, Sam. One of these I do. So, right here, yes. So I say, hey, text handler, what properties changed? I can verify what changed, what didn't, and I make sure only those things changed. Even inside of my bindings, I make sure that I don't run that build command too much, because I keep track of every time build was called. How many times did I call build? And so I'm testing these things, and these are real Comet views, and I'm running tests against them. It doesn't have to have, since all it has to do is have something, this handler. That's all it is that's the UI, the native representation. For test, a native representation is just this model which keeps track of everything that happened. So that way I can ask it what happened. So
cool.
These views are fully testable. Since the view and the view model, it's all the same thing, just test that, just like you would with a view model. Except now you are actually verifying that the notifications happened. I didn't have to do anything extra to hook into those or to test that my bindings work. I can. This is testing. It's letting the framework do its job. And then I ask it what changed. I don't even have to ask it what changed. I can ask it what. Normally you don't care about that. I do, since I'm writing a framework. But now I'm saying that, hey, the test should now be test, right? Hey, guess what? The value is now test. It's right. It did change.
Cool. Yeah, I like it.
100% testable. No reason it shouldn't be. I write tests against my stuff. It's not really creating UI. It's creating this handler instead, or renderer. It'd be called a renderer in the whatever our current stuff is. And yeah, we do this to test our layout. We do this to test out how things work. So that's all it is. That is the only boilerplate code I wrote to do my testing. That one thing. And now everything's testable.
And is this UI test like part of the library in the repo?
This is all in the repo, yes.
Okay.
You can go play with this and look at it. And so I did create a couple other extra handlers to handle things I don't know why we did. I have no idea why those are in there. I didn't add those. Some people, we did this during our last year's Microsoft Hackathon. I had some people join in, and so some of the stuff was added by them because, yeah, it's not really needed. But I guess they're overriding the size. So it would do layout. I think that's what the whole point was. So that way it would come up with an intrinsic size for layout. So that's probably the layout tests that are using those.
Okay. All right.
But again, you guys wouldn't care about that when you're building your app.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So again, maybe a trick question. I don't know if you're ready to answer this yet. But moving forward, like if you're interested in MVU Pattern, if somebody wants to try out Comet, which one should we keep an eye out on, and how is this evolving with .NET MAUI?
So Comet is my playground. It is. So as I mentioned, like there's that other branch I've been working on. Right now, there's a little bit of boilerplate you need to do to write things if you're writing your own models. So in order to get all this magic data binding, you need to have a model that implements a new interface called iNotifyPropertyRead. So I know what properties are used, so that's how I know how to magic data bind. If I know what you used, I know when it was used and how it was used, I can update, like I showed, just that label and do those quick incremental diffs. I gave you a base class that makes it super, super easy to use it. If I go into the sample, there is like a song model. I gave you this binding object, so you can just do this type of stuff, so your boiler code's not too crazy. But that's how I do magic data binding on complex data objects. If it's something basic, or if it's something that you're doing with records, or the type of thing where it changes every time, and you're doing immutable models, then you just use state. You don't even have to deal with this binding object. You can just use state, swap out the state, and it'll just update. You won't get, it'll work just like every other MVU pattern, to where I'm going to diff the tree every time, and that's fine. It's not as efficient, but it works. In bigger apps, getting this extra fine-tuned layer. And so this new branch I'm working on is I'm trying to ditch this. And I think I can. Using code generators, I think I can get rid of this. I'm working on it. And so like I said, Comet is my playground. It's where things are changing. Like right now, you'll notice my hot reload wasn't working like it should, and I don't know why. It should have. I need to figure out what's on the state and get that back to where it was. I thought I fixed that because I was having that issue before. So I think I fixed it on the branch and didn't put it into master. So Comet's just in that type of state. It's my playground.
Right.
The Maui MVU is going to be the official repo where we're doing things in official state. None of the MVU stuff's in there yet because I want to try and continue cleaning this stuff up. And if I get this stuff cleaned up to the point to where we don't need this binding object type thing, and we don't need this interface, that's going to be amazing. So I'm working on doing that now.
Yeah, and then the good news is we have a bit of a runway to get this right. Get the whole community going and do this right. And I mean, if I'm a Xamarin Forms developer today, and if I love my XAML and C# just the way I've always done things, and I don't want you to move my cheese. So going forward in Maui, I'm guessing the goal would be with the try convert to just switch over to using the mappers and the renderers, right?
Yeah, when you switch to Maui, you're basically going to change some namespaces and you're going to ditch your project heads.
Yeah.
That's about it. Your XAML is going to be the same. Namespaces are going to be different. But in the end, it's all the same. Nothing's going to be different for you. It's just going to be, you're going to have your XAML. The beautiful thing about that is, let's just say you have a project, you're all XAML, and you want to switch to MVU. You don't have to rewrite it all. Our entire goal with this is, since we're using the same renders, you can mix and match between MVU and Comet. You can put, we don't have an example of doing this, but you'll be able to, inside of your view, inside of an HStack, you should be able to do new Mvvm, because it'll be like an Mvvm dot button. Guess what? You can throw a button, an Mvvm button in there. That Mvvm button is not going to have any of the data binding stuff, the magic data binding. It's going to expect you to set binding, all that type of thing. You're going to be able to mix and match these things in line. They do have different namespaces because they work differently. But you'll be able to mix and match them in line. That means that your custom controls, which won't be in a custom namespace, you'll be able to just grab your existing custom control. You'll be able to say, on button click, navigate to my XAML form page. It won't matter. You're going to be able to just inline switch between the two. So you can start doing just one screen, one user control, and MVU, see if you like it. You can, you have full power to mix and match as you please.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I can say as a Xamarin developer, I haven't been excited this much for a few years now. So this is very, very cool. Looking forward to the Maui previews coming out. I think that started towards the end of this year, November timeframe, maybe.
I think that's about right. So yeah, according to our timelines, as soon as right now the Forms team is working on getting we're working on finalizing the roadmap. We should be finalizing it. There's a meeting today, actually. I think we're going to talk more about it. So there's a meeting last week where we got a lot of the roadmap work, and I think we're going to try and finalize it in a meeting I have later today. As they move through more of that stuff and they start getting things ready, right now the Maui repo is just not ready for Comet. It'll just add too much noise because the renderers aren't in a place to where I can use them yet. So once we have enough of the renderers and enough of the interfaces in place, then we'll start doing some of the MVU stuff inside of the Maui repo. And so hopefully we'll have stuff in before those previews start flying out. But right now I'm working on the stuff. Like I said, Comet would have been done had I not been worrying about renderers. So now I'm not worried about renderers at all. And I'm only worried about the interesting and unique parts, like, can I ditch binding object completely? So where we don't have to have that notification for when things change. And I think we can. And I think we can still get this really awesome binding experience. And I think we're going to even be able to simplify this code. Right now, you're noticing I'm even doing stuff like this. Oh, no, that's on the button. But on this text, you'll notice I have it inside of a function. I think I'm going to be able to even ditch that function code and just do that. And still get magic updating. So we'll diff just this text, not the whole tree. So code generators are awesome, and I'm really trying to push the envelope of what I can do with those. But I think eventually we'll get to the point to where I can, and it's going to be hot. I'm excited.
Yeah, exciting for sure. All right, James. Anything more to show while we're looking at your desktop? You showed us
just
quite a bit of cool stuff.
If you guys have questions or Like I said, hopefully we'll eventually get like a Skia drawn there, so you can have things that are unique Skia wise. But the nice thing is, if we do that effort once, it'll work for everybody. So we're really, really excited for that.
Absolutely.
And there is some Skia drawing inside of Comet if you want to play with maybe what that might look like.
Okay.
It's kind of fun. It even has animation in the Skia.
Nice, nice. I have not honestly dug a whole lot into it. I just know how to do the basics just by the getting started guide, but definitely more things, and our engineering is going to be excited. So folks in the chat room, I'm going to drop the GitHub repo to Comet one more time, and yeah, let's switch back to our chat mode. If you are into or excited about .NET MAUI, keep an eye out definitely on Comet if you are looking at the MVU stuff. And yeah, when there are folks like James and David Ortno and Maddie and everybody on the Xamarin team, this is an exciting time and lots of things happening and lots of exciting things happening. So what are you looking forward to for the next couple of months? That was a question for you. To James. Yeah.
So there's a couple different projects that we have working in the pipes that are pretty excited for this hackathon.
Mm-hmm.
Every year Microsoft has a hack week. Lots of fun things. We get to work on whatever we want and form teams, and there's competition. I ended up joining a team this year that was working on just adding more VS Code support for things like Xamarin and things like that. So hopefully we can get funding to get some of that truly out. I mean, we've already showed some of that. It shouldn't be an issue. But hopefully we'll be able to get better support in VS Code for things like real Xamarin and Xamarin Forums. And so there's some really exciting things like that on the roadmap that hopefully we'll be able to get out. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So I have James's Twitter right down there, so you know how to get hold of him or me if you're doing anything Xamarin. I would love to hear. One thing, James, I did not realize until we scheduled this was it's .NET Conf Day. Visual Studio is hosting. It's microservices. So, folks, if you want to hang out with us, I'm going to hand you over to the Visual Studio channel and learn a little bit more about microservices. But James, thank you. I know it's early morning and you have a packed day coming up. Thank you for hanging out with me, and thank you, folks. We love you.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate all of you, and have a nice day, and we'll see you next time.